Restoring Men in History, great one today. Alien and Sedition Acts, focused on the Sedition Acts and what it did and how men tried to hold on to power and what the Anti-Federalists said was going to happen. The Federalist at this time in history, 1798, John Adams is the president. He is a what? Federalist. House is controlled by what? The Federalist. Senate's controlled by what? The Federalist. So you've got one party that dominates. They control the House, Senate, and the presidency. So they passed these 4 laws. What they want to do with these laws are to make sure they remain in power with the Sedition Act and the Naturalization Act. But we're going to focus on the Sedition Act. They also have the Alien Friends Act and the Aliens Enemies Act. But we're going to focus on the Sedition Act because I want to keep this, if we can, short if we can. So right away at the beginning of the country, John Adams signs it. The House and Senate passed this unconstitutional act. And why is this important today? Because this is what has happened through history. You got to prevent the government and restrain them. We formed a limited government, and right away, 1798 already, John Adams is only the what? 2nd president, and they're already trying to take more power and wipe out your Bill of Rights. Watch what they do. So let's read the act so you can hear it. This is part of the Sedition Act. Ready? An act in addition to the act entitled, quote, an act for the punishment of certain crimes against the United States. Watch who they're trying to punishment, and then we'll give you the context of why this is in here. But I want you to hear the real words, and I think it's important. We'll read some of it, not all of it. And be it enacted, Section 2 further enacted, that if any person shall write, look how serious this is, ladies and gentlemen, write, print, utter, or publish, or shall cause, or procure to be written, printed, uttered, or published, or shall knowingly and willingly assist or aid in writing, uttering or publishing any false, scandalous, or malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States, or either House of the Congress of the United States or the President of the United States, with intent to defame the same government, or either House of the said Congress or the said President, or to bring them, either of them, into contempt or disrepute. Imagine that in a political campaign, or to excite against them, or either or any of them, the hatred of the good people. Now, in what campaign are you not going to, many campaigns are going to try to make the other party be hated, right? Or to stir up sedition within the United States. Okay. Now, what happens, let's cut down, we don't want to bore you, when you break that, and you shall be punished. What happens when you break that? You shall be punished by a fine not exceeding, get this, at the time, 1798, $2,000, and by imprisonment not exceeding 2 years. For what? Now that will shut down your political opposition, right? And shut down free speech. And what does it break? It breaks the First Amendment of the Constitution. So right away, imagine how dangerous that would be. Can't make malicious statements, false statements in a political campaign or at any time. Scandalous statements. So you can't call out anything. No memes, right? Remember the meme guy that got sent to jail for Hillary Clinton making a meme? Look at all the memes today. Everybody be going to jail, right? With this law, with the Federalists wanted to pass. No jokes calling Adam short, right? No jokes criticizing, right? What does this take away? You can't even criticize what? And this is important. Can't criticize the federal government, which is supposed to be a limited one. And you have the Bill of Rights protecting you. Now imagine some context to that. In those words, what did you hear? Can't be, the Federalist had started a paper called the Gazette of the United States. And you got to go back into the newspaper history. And I brought this up in a group years and years ago. This, one of the guys said, if we could only have the newspapers of the past. And I said, wait a minute. Way back it started, the fights and the contention, and that's okay. The Federalist had the Gazette of the United States. That was a Federalist paper. That's fine. So Jefferson and Madison wanted their own paper, the National Gazette, a Democratic Republican paper. Now, here's what this act would do. Not just prevent you from speaking, but Jefferson would write articles, Madison would write articles, and the Federalists. And good, that's fine. What would that do to them? They'd go to jail for that. You go to jail for criticizing a congressman, a senator, or the president. Can you imagine that today? I mean, they work around it with the Twitter files and all that, right? It's not like it's perfect. But imagine this law being on the books. So you got the Patriot Act. But anyway, imagine this law is being on the books. UShistory.org states, under the terms of this law, over 20 Democratic Republican newspaper editors were arrested and some were imprisoned. How many Federalist newspaper editors do you think were imprisoned? 0, that's right. So you had the political parties, the Federalists, attacking the other political party and trying to dominate it early on. with these means of breaking the Constitution. The most dramatic victim of the law was Representative Matthew Lyon. You heard of this guy from Vermont? His letter that criticized Adams, and this was what he wrote: unbounded thirst for ridiculous pomp. That's not even that bad in terms of policy. Foolish adulation. By the way, in that other letter, you couldn't even disagree with the law or policies in that law, right? So let's go into this. For ridiculous pomp, foolish adulation. How about this, Jeff? And self-avarice. What happened to him? Do you think he went to jail? Guess what? He went to jail. He was imprisoned while Federalists sent Lyon to prison for his opinions. So the Federalists sent this guy to prison. He wasn't the only one. We could bring up others, but I'm trying to keep it shorter. But at least 20 of them went, according to ushistory.org, and I've got other names of other people. We won't bring them up. But guess what? The people, you the people, they came through his constituents, and this is fantastic, reelected him to Congress. Isn't that great? And guess what happened November 5th? Guess what you the people did? You sent Donald Trump back after all that lawfare. This is very relevant for today because they are trying to shut down free speech. And I want to try to show you that this started back in 1798 of the people in power, the Federalists, wanting to shut your voice down, wanting to shut free speech down, they were willing to break the Constitution. Let's read the Constitution while I break that up. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. They just broke it. Or of the press. They just broke it. So think about this. This was meant to do what? Your Bill of Rights was meant to restrain the federal government. And they broke it. And they wrote it and they put it on paper. They're not even doing it like the Twitter files and going to Facebook and all the stuff that's happening right now. They're still trying to take your free speech, the federal government. This is the case right here. Let me just say this. This is the great case, Kurt Chatham, for limited government. You want a very small, limited government with only the enumerated powers. Because see how they already, in 1798, wanted to break the Constitution and did break the Constitution? They passed this law. John Adams signed it. The House and Senate passed it. They broke the Constitution right away. 1798, broke it. Against you, the people. Which Patrick Henry had said, Richard Henry Lee, George Mason wasn't happy with the written Constitution. And why'd they do it? Control, power, right? That's why you need a limited federal government. Here's what Madison wrote. Now, here's the great thing. What has to happen when the federal government breaks the Constitution? You, the people, have to stand up lawfully and peacefully. And a couple of guys did. You know what their names were? The great Thomas Jefferson and James Madison stood. And they said, gentlemen, that's unconstitutional. And they wrote it down on a piece of paper in the Virginia resolutions and the Kentucky resolutions. And they stood for you, for free speech, for the First Amendment, and for the U.S. Constitution. Give it up to Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, two men standing. Two men stood. And when the federal government breaks the Constitution, look at all the unconstitutional agencies we've got. Look at the debt. Look at the deficit. It takes you, the American people, standing and calling it out every time. Unconstitutional agencies, by the way, there's separation of power. So an agency can't write law and enforce it. They do it all the time. EPA, ATF, all right? So this is important. And this is what Madison wrote, that the General Assembly doth particularly protest against the palpable and alarming infractions of the what? And we love this, the magical, the Constitution. Madison right away calls it out. In the two late cases of the Alien and Sedition Acts, he writes it, passed at the last session of Congress, the first of which exercises a power where nowhere delegated to the federal government. And that's a key, right? If it's not delegated to the federal government, if it's not enumerated, it belongs to where? Where does it belong? The states. In which by uniting legislative and judicial powers to those of executive, subverts the general principles of free government. What does that say in separation of powers? An agency can't write and be the executive. Only whom can write law? The Congress. That's it, period. An administrative agency can't write law. So anytime an administrative agency writes a law, they're unconstitutional. Subverts the general principles of free government, as well as the particular organization and positive provisions of the federal Constitution, and the other of which acts exercises in like manner a power not delegated by the Constitution. States had to give the power, but on the contrary, expressly and positively forbidden by one of the amendments. So it was forbidden by the First Amendment. John Adams broke it. The House broke it. The Senate broke it. All of them broke it right away, 1798. It's amazing, right? Human nature. Which more than any ought to produce universal alarm. And we ought to be alarmed every time Congress does an unconstitutional law. the Patriot Act, unconstitutional. Because it is leveled against the right of freely examining public care, we need to end the Fed, and measures, and of free communication among the people thereon. So already, look how important he believes free speech is. It is leveled against that right of freely examining public characters and measures, and of free communication among the people. Look how important he thinks free communication that we need free speech to each other. Especially this was restraining the federal government, and they're the ones writing it. They actually write it down that we are breaking the Constitution. That's how bold they were. And it's the only effectual guardian of every other right. That this state, having by its convention, which ratified the federal Constitution, expressly declared that among other essential rights, the liberty of conscience and of press cannot be canceled, abridged, restrained, or modified by any authority of the United States. James Madison. And from its extreme anxiety to guard these rights from every possible attack of sophistry or ambition, having with other states recommended an amendment for that person. So what did Jefferson and Madison have? They had the American spirit of liberty. Patrick Henry had it. And they stood up. Now, notice at the time, now one thing we want to look at. The Federalists broke the Constitution. Madison said the House should respond to the will of the people. So here's the question of this that we just covered. How did the people react? Did they love states' rights and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution? Or did they vote to put the Federalists back in the election of 1800, because we had an election in 1800? Thomas Jefferson was running for president. The key question is how the American voter would respond. Federalist John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. Now in the race, I just want to say this real quick. Burr got 73, Jefferson got 73, and Adams 65. So they had to work it out because there was no delineation at the time for VP and president. So Thomas Jefferson gets the presidency, and then let's look at the House of Representatives and the Senate. House of Representatives, the Democratic Republicans won 22 seats and went to 68 seats. They dominated. It was a blowout. What played a role? Strong central government, Federalist versus the states' rights, Democratic Republicans, Bill of Rights people, those against the Constitution, those for the Constitution. So in this election, what came through the American people? Madison said it would respond to the people of the House, and it did. They took the House. They dominated the House. The Federalists, by the way, never won the House again. That wiped them out. So it showed that the people were close to the Constitution at the beginning of the country. The people won there. And the people rewarded the people that followed the Constitution and the First Amendment. They didn't like that. The attack on the Bill of Rights versus the defense on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Democratic Republicans defending the Bill of Rights, Federalists attacking it. There were only 10 Senate seats up, so in the Senate, the Democratic Republicans picked up 3, that's a lot, and the Senate went from 2111 to 1714. But get this, that was in 1800. By mid-1801, because of the special elections, why are we going through this? Because the people responded. They had the American spirit still. They understood the Constitution still. The Democratic Republicans took the Senate. So think about it. Limited government won. Limited government was ratified, and it still was dominant in the people's minds and the hearts and the spirit of the people. This showed you they wanted limited government. They didn't want the Federalists. They didn't want big government. They picked up many, by the way. What happened in the state legislatures? Well, they dominated in the state legislatures and picked up many of those. So this was the wiping out. That Sedition Act, attacking the Constitution back in the day. Imagine if these agencies and all the unconstitutional agencies and all the way we've transgressed and stepped on the Constitution today. Imagine if we had the people of then. And we need to raise that spirit again and restore the Constitution. So look at the founders' intent in this race. The people were upset, and they showed it in the House, and the founders wanted the House to be responsive to the people, and the people were. You came through. And Madison, I think in 44, Federalist 44 said it'd be up to the people to fix it through elections, and they did. So they did what Madison said they needed to do in Federalist 44. By the 1820s, the Federalist Party was completely wiped up. Americans abhorred the infringement of the Sedition Act and the Alien and Sedition Acts, and they voted them all the way out. Those Americans loved liberty. They had the spirit of liberty, and that was the spirit in 1800. Individual rights, limited government. So what did all these elections show you? The American spirit. They had the spirit of liberty then. Patrick Henry was still around, was still in their hearts. The Constitution was in their hearts. And what else does it show you? Elections matter. Your vote mattered. It mattered then. And it was a direct vote for states' rights in the U.S. Constitution, limited government. What else does it show you? Free speech matters, the First Amendment speech, and you need it. They knew it was important. They wanted to shut it down. And that still happens today. People are wanting to shut down your voice because they know truth resonates, because they know how important it is. But we got to keep it. We have to lawfully and peacefully defend the Constitution. Thank you.